Welcome back, my friend. The lamps are lit, the wind has quieted, and somewhere in the shadows the Niffler has found something shiny again. But this time, it's not gold. It's a story, and tonight, he's ready to share it with you. So settle in and listen closely. It begins like this.
The autumn wind whispered ancient secrets among the heather-covered hills of Glen Aithne, carrying with it the scent of rain and something more, a foreboding that hung in the air like invisible mist. Rowena Ravenclaw climbed the winding path between the rocky slopes, her long dark hair streaming in the breeze, her eyes, deep as mountain tarns, gazing thoughtfully upon her native land. She was returning home after 3 months spent in the ancient library of Maeve the Wise, where she had studied the most delicate arts of mental magic. In her leather satchel lay notes on spells that could penetrate the deepest corners of the human mind, but her most precious treasure was the knowledge she had gained about the Codex Mentalis, an ancient book kept in the mysterious depths of Glen Aithne's library. When Rowena finally glimpsed the familiar wisps of smoke rising from the cottage chimneys, her heart filled with warmth. Glen Aithne spread before her like a living painting, small stone houses with thatched roofs nestled in the sheltered valley between green hills. A stream babbled merrily through the center of the village, and beside it stood the old mill where Hamish MacLeod ground grain for the entire area. "Rowena," she heard a familiar voice. Young Mora, the blacksmith's daughter, was running toward her along the path, her red hair blazing in the sunlight. "You've come back. Everyone thought you'd stay in that old library forever, reading your mysterious books." Rowena smiled, feeling the tension of recent months gradually fade away. "Books are treasures, Mora, but home is what gives them true meaning." They walked together through the village, and Rowena noticed familiar faces. Old Fergus weaving baskets beside his cottage, young Duncan herding sheep on the hillsides, and children playing by the stream. Everything seemed unchanged, so peaceful and safe that it was hard to believe in the existence of dark forces she had read about in ancient tomes. "How are things with Maeve?" asked Mora as they approached the village center. "They say she knows spells that can change reality itself." "Maeve is wise," Rowena replied carefully. "But the most powerful spells are those that affect the mind, not reality. When you understand how people think, you can predict their actions." Mora nodded, though it was clear she didn't entirely understand. For most inhabitants of Glen Aithne, magic was something mysterious and distant. They knew Rowena had unusual abilities. Everyone had seen how she could find lost animals simply by concentrating, or how flowers bloomed faster where she tended them. But they saw her more as an odd girl with books than as a powerful witch. By the old oak in the village center, Isla awaited her, the elderly librarian of Glen Aithne. Her gray hair was braided in an intricate plait, and her eyes, as blue as mountain lakes, shone with the wisdom of centuries. Isla was the only person in the village who truly understood the depth of Rowena's knowledge. "Child," said Isla, embracing Rowena, "I felt your approach yesterday. Your magical aura has grown much stronger." "Maeve taught me a great deal," Rowena replied, "especially about protective spells for the mind." Isla's eyes grew serious. "Come with me. We need to speak privately." They made their way to the library, a low stone building that stood somewhat apart from the other houses. Inside, it was much larger than it appeared from without. Magic expanded the space, creating countless rooms filled with ancient volumes, scrolls, and magical artifacts. Isla led Rowena to the deepest room, where upon a pedestal of black stone lay a book bound in dark blue with silver runes. The Codex Mentalis. Even without touching it, Rowena could feel the powerful energy radiating from the ancient tome. "During your absence," Isla began in a quiet voice, "I sense troubling changes in the magical currents. Someone seeks the Codex. Someone powerful and dangerous." Rowena felt a chill run down her spine. "Dark wizards?" "Yes, child. I have seen them in visions. A group of sorcerers led by one they call Malachar the Ravenbane. They have learned of the Codex's existence, and now they hunt for it." "Why now?" asked Rowena, moving closer to the ancient book. "Perhaps because you have returned. Your power resonates with the Codex. You are one of the few who can understand its true nature. Or perhaps it is simply time." Rowena reached toward the book, feeling her fingers tremble with magical energy. "What makes it so special?" "The Codex Mentalis contains the most ancient knowledge of mind magic. Spells that can read thoughts, create realistic illusions, even control the consciousness of others. In the right hands, it is a tool of wisdom and protection. In the wrong hands, a weapon of terrible destruction. Fear mingled with determination in Rowena's eyes. We cannot allow it to fall into the hands of dark wizards. No, Isla agreed. But I am old, child. My days of great magic are past. Now it falls to you. At that moment, Hamish burst into the library, his face red from running. Isla, Rowena, you must see this. On the northern slope, strange shadows moving among the trees. And Fergus says his dog has been howling all day and won't go in that direction. Rowena and Isla exchanged serious glances. Scouts. The enemy was already here. Show me, said Rowena, leaving the library. Hamish led them to the village outskirts where a small group of residents had gathered. All were looking toward the northern hillside where, between the pine trees, indistinct shadows were indeed moving, too straight and purposeful to be animals. Those aren't ordinary travelers, whispered Moira, pressing close to her father. Rowena closed her eyes and opened her mind, using one of the spells Maeve had taught her. Men's observance, the spell of mind observation. Immediately she felt the presence of an alien consciousness, cold, cruel, full of dark intentions. A dark wizard, she whispered, opening her eyes. One scout. He's searching for something, or someone. What shall we do? Asked Hamish, his voice trembling. I'll go and look, said Rowena decisively. Rowena, no, protested Isla. It's too dangerous. That's exactly why I must go. If he's truly seeking the Codex, then I'm the only one who can stop him. Despite protests, Rowena headed toward the forest. She moved silently, using her knowledge of every path, every stone in her native land. In autumn, the forest was especially beautiful. Golden and crimson leaves created a mosaic of colors, and the air was fresh and clean. But as she approached the place where the shadows had been spotted, the atmosphere changed. The trees seemed more somber, birds fell silent, and even the wind grew still. The magic here was dark, unnatural. Rowena saw him by a large boulder, a tall man in a dark hooded cloak. He stood motionless, but she could feel his mind scanning the surroundings, searching for magical traces. In his hand he held a strange crystal that glowed faintly with violet light. Using a concealment spell that allowed her to blend with her surroundings, Rowena crept closer. Now she could hear him muttering to himself. The Codex is here, the energy ancient and powerful. But where exactly? Suddenly he turned directly toward her, and Rowena realized she had been detected. The dark wizard had a thin, angular face with sharp features and eyes that burned with red fire. When he smiled, his teeth seemed too pointed. Well, well, he said in a voice like the rustling of dry leaves. Who do we have here? A little local witch. Rowena stepped from behind the tree, focusing her magic. Who are you and what do you want in our village? My name is Grimwald, and I serve the great Malachar the Ravenbane. And I need, shall we say, one very valuable item kept somewhere nearby. There's nothing here that could interest you. Grimwald laughed. The sound was like the cawing of ravens. Oh, little one, you can't even imagine how wrong you are. The Codex Mentalis is one of the most powerful books that ever existed, and my magic tells me it's somewhere very close indeed. Rowena's heart pounded, but she kept her face impassive. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't you? Grimwald raised his crystal, and it shone brighter. Strange. My detection magic says you're lying. Moreover, his eyes narrowed. You bear the trace of the Codex's magic. You have touched it. Rowena realized she could no longer play this game. Time to act. She concentrated on one of the most powerful spells Maeve had taught her, Turorum Interiorem, a spell that forced an enemy to confront their deepest fears. Closing her eyes for a moment, she delved into Grimwald's mind. What did he fear most? Loneliness, being abandoned by his master, losing his magical power. When she opened her eyes, illusions began forming around Grimwald. At first they were only shadows, but then they took shape. Malachar looking at him with contempt and saying, You are a failure, Grimwald. You are not worthy of my trust. The dark wizard stepped back, his face contorting with horror. What are you doing? Showing you the truth, Rowena said calmly, strengthening the illusion. Now Grimwald saw himself old and feeble, stripped of magical power, begging in the streets of some distant city. Stop, he screamed, pointing his wand at her and casting an attack spell. But Rowena was ready. She created a mental shield, deflecting the spell, and simultaneously increased the pressure on his mind. Now Grimwald saw armies of the dead rising from the earth to punish him for all his dark deeds. Enough! He made another attempt to attack, but his hands trembled with fear, and the spell flew wide of its target. Rowena stepped forward, her eyes blazing with determination. "Tell your master this. Glen Athne is under protection. If you come here with dark intentions, you will face power you do not expect." Grimwald tried once more to focus, but the illusions had become too strong. He saw himself imprisoned, saw Malachar punishing him for failure, saw his own death. With a final desperate cry, he turned and fled, crashing through the forest, stumbling over roots and bushes. Rowena waited until he vanished from sight, then slowly relaxed, releasing the magical energy. Her first real battle with a dark wizard was over, but she understood this was only the beginning. When she returned to the village, the entire community awaited her. Anxiety, fear, and expectation were written on people's faces. "What was it?" asked Hamish. "A dark wizard," Rowena replied simply. "A scout. He was looking for something valuable." "And what did you do to him?" asked Mora with a mixture of fear and admiration. "I convinced him to leave." Rowena didn't go into details. "But he will return. And not alone." Isla approached her, her face serious. "Child, you did what needed to be done. But now they know we are here. They know someone can resist." "So what does this mean?" asked old Fergus. Rowena looked at the faces gathered around her, at these simple, good people who trusted her with their safety. At Mora with her blazing red hair, at young Duncan who looked at her with new respect, at Hamish and his wife Eileen holding their little son. "It means," she said slowly, "we need to prepare for battle. Real battle." Silence filled the village. No one had expected such words from the girl they all knew as a quiet book lover. "But we're simple folk," whispered Eileen. "We're not warriors." "It doesn't matter," Rowena replied with unwavering determination in her voice. "I will teach you. I will protect you. But first you need to understand one thing." She looked around at everyone present. "The girl with books you knew me as is still here. But books have taught me more than just how to cast spells. They've taught me to understand human nature, to predict enemies' actions, to use their weaknesses against them. In the coming battle, mind will be more important than strength." As the sun began to set behind the hills of Glen Athne, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Rowena stood by the library window looking out at her native village. Tomorrow the real work would begin, preparing for the battle she knew was inevitably approaching. Isla approached her with 2 cups of hot tea. "Are you ready for this, child?" Rowena took the cup, feeling its warmth through the porcelain. "I don't know if anyone is ever ready for such things, but I have no choice. The Codex cannot fall into the hands of dark wizards. And the village? The village is my home. These people have entrusted me with their safety. I will not fail them." Outside the window, stars began appearing in the dark sky, and the wind brought the scent of approaching rain. Somewhere out there, in the darkness, the enemy was preparing to attack. But here, in the cozy library of Glen Athne, a young witch was planning a defense that would rely not on the brute force of spells, but on the most subtle and powerful magic of all, the magic of the mind. And as Rowena Ravenclaw lay down to sleep that night, a plan for the battle was already forming in her head, a battle that would show the world that true power comes not from destruction, but from understanding. The first rays of morning sun pierced through the mist that slowly rose from Glen Athne's valley, creating an enchanting atmosphere of golden and silver reflections. Rowena had awakened before dawn. Her mind would not rest, turning over strategies and possibilities. She knew they had at most 2 or 3 days before Grimwald returned with his report to his master, and then the real battle would begin. Dressed in a practical dark blue gown that allowed free movement, Rowena left the library and headed toward the village center. The morning air was fresh and cool, filled with the fragrances of heather and pine. Around the old oak, residents were already gathering. Some had brought bread and milk, others blankets for those who had come with small children. "Rowena," called Mora, running up to her. "Father says you want to teach us protective magic?" "Not exactly magic," Rowena replied thoughtfully. "More intelligent tactics. Magic is a tool, but the most important tool is your mind." When everyone had assembled, about 30 adults and teenagers, Rowena climbed onto a low stone platform beside the oak. She looked at the familiar faces, Hamish with his family, old Fergus leaning on his stick, young Duncan with his 2 brothers, Mora and her blacksmith father, and many others. "My friends," she began in a voice that, despite her youth, carried the confidence of a leader. "Yesterday evening our village was visited by a dark wizard. He was searching for something precious kept in our library. I forced him to leave, but he will return with reinforcements." A murmur ran through the crowd. Someone whispered, "Perhaps it would be better to give them what they seek." "No," Rowena replied firmly. "What they seek, in the wrong hands, could bring terrible evil to the entire world. We cannot allow this. But it means we must prepare to defend ourselves." Old Fergus raised a trembling hand. "Child, we are not warriors. We are simple village folk. How can we fight dark wizards?" Rowena smiled, not condescendingly, but with warmth and understanding. "Fergus, you're right. You are not warriors in the traditional sense. But you have something far more powerful: knowledge of this land, understanding of each other, and most importantly—" She paused, "your minds." She stepped down from the platform and moved to the center of the circle. "Dark wizards rely on force, on fear, on chaos. They expect us to panic, to scatter in all directions. But if we act intelligently, organized, using every advantage that knowledge of the terrain gives us—" "What advantage?" asked Duncan skeptically. "Come, I'll show you." Rowena led the group to the edge of the village where the forests began. She stopped on a low hill from which the entire valley was clearly visible. "Duncan, how many paths lead to our village?" The young man considered. "Three main ones. The northern, that's where the dark wizard came from yesterday. The eastern, it goes through the forest to the Great Road. And the southwestern, it winds between the rocks." "And how many secret paths do you children know, having played in these forests since childhood?" Mora brightened. "Oh, many. There's a passage through the cave behind the waterfall. There's a path along the stream that leads to the old druid stone. And also—" "Exactly," nodded Rowena. "The enemy knows the main routes, but not the secret ones. That's our first advantage." She led them further, showing different sections of the terrain. "Hamish, your mill stands at the narrowest part of the valley. If we dam the stream with stones a bit upstream, then—" "The water rises and floods the entire left bank path," the blacksmith realized. "No one could pass there without getting soaked. And wet people move slowly and make noise," added Duncan, beginning to understand. "Correct. Now look at that slope." Rowena pointed to a steep hillside covered with loose stones. "What happens if someone unfamiliar tries to climb there in darkness?" "The stones will slide," answered Mora. "There'll be a terrible racket, and one could break a leg." "Or worse," added Fergus grimly. "Exactly. And now the most important thing." Rowena turned to the group. "All these natural traps become 10 times more effective if we add a touch of magic to them. Not powerful, destructive magic, simple, clever spells." She approached a large stone beside the path. "For instance, Umbra Movens, the spell of moving shadows. It makes shadows move unnaturally, creating the impression that far more people are hiding in the forest than actually are." Rowena extended her hand toward the stone and whispered several words in an ancient tongue. Immediately, the shadows around the stone began moving independently, like living creatures. Several people stepped back, but Duncan clapped his hands. "That's wonderful. They'll think there's an ambush." "Precisely. And now another spell, Susuri Silvi." This time she touched the branch of an old pine. Suddenly the forest filled with quiet whispers, as if dozens of people were murmuring among the trees. "A sound illusion," explained Rowena. "The enemy will hear voices everywhere and won't be able to determine where the real threat is." Mora's eyes widened. "Can you teach us such spells?" "Some of them, yes. But the best spells are those that require no magic at all." For the next 2 hours, Rowena led the group around the vicinity, showing how to use the natural features of the landscape. She taught them to tie simple rope snares, showed how to arrange branches to create an audible signal of strangers' approach, explained how to use moonlight reflections on water to disorient enemies in darkness. But most important were the mind spells she gradually revealed to the most gifted students. "Duncan," she said when they returned to the village, "you have an aptitude for magic. Try this." She taught him the simple spell to Morlinus, Light Fear. Not powerful enough to cause harm, but sufficient to make an enemy hesitate, look around, become distracted. "Focus on the feeling of slight anxiety," she instructed. "Imagine someone watching you from behind. Now project that feeling outward." Duncan closed his eyes, frowning with concentration. When he extended his hand toward a group of rabbits grazing nearby, the animals suddenly raised their heads, looked around anxiously, and scattered. "I did it," he exclaimed with delight. "Yes, but remember, it must be subtle. If the enemy realizes it's magic, he can counter it." While Duncan and several other young people practiced simple spells, Rowena worked with the rest of the group on tactics. She divided them into small teams, each responsible for a certain section of terrain. Your goal is not to kill enemies, she emphasized. Your goal is to confuse them, frighten them, make them act rashly. When a person is afraid and doesn't understand what's happening, they make mistakes. When the sun reached its zenith, they took a break for lunch. Isla brought a large basket of bread, cheese, and apples. While everyone ate, sitting on the grass by the stream, the atmosphere was almost festive. Children laughed at the new tricks they had learned to do. Adults discussed defense plans. But Rowena knew this was only the calm before the storm. After lunch, she took Isla aside. "How are things with the Codex?" she asked quietly. "I've strengthened the protective charms around the library," the old witch replied. "But if a truly powerful dark wizard comes..." "Malachar." "Yes. If he comes personally, my protective charms won't stop him. At least not for long." Rowena nodded, thinking. "Then we need to ensure he simply doesn't reach the library." They devoted the second half of the day to practical exercises. Rowena organized something like a game. One group played attackers, the other defenders. The attackers had to reach the village center, while the defenders had to stop them using all the tricks they'd learned. The results were impressive. Even without real magic, using only knowledge of the terrain and simple traps, the defenders repeatedly delayed and disoriented the attackers. And when Duncan and several others added their new magical skills. "This is impossible," exclaimed Hamish, who was playing for the attackers. "We got lost 3 times, fell into traps twice, and constantly felt like someone was watching us." "That's exactly what we want to achieve," Rowena smiled. As twilight began to gather, she assembled everyone for a final talk. "Tomorrow or the day after they will come," she said seriously. "Perhaps 5, perhaps more. They will be armed, dangerous, and determined. But remember, we are not alone. We have each other, we have this land, and we have something they don't have." "What?" asked Mora. "The righteousness of our cause. We are defending home, family, what is dear to us. They come with greed and malice. Ultimately, this gives us strength they cannot understand." As people dispersed to their homes, Rowena remained by the stream, looking at stars reflected in the dark water. Duncan approached her. "Rowena, what if we don't win?" She looked at him, a serious, brave lad who had learned to work magic in a single day. "Duncan, remember one thing. Victory doesn't always mean destroying the enemy. Sometimes victory means protecting what's important, giving people time to escape, or simply showing that there are things worth fighting for." "And the Codex?" "The Codex is important, but people are more important. If I have to choose between preserving a book and preserving the life of even one person from our village..." "You'd save the person." "Yes, but," she smiled mysteriously, "who says I'll have to choose? We haven't used our greatest advantage yet." "Which is?" "That they don't know what we're capable of." Late that night, when the entire village slept, Rowena sat in the library before the Codex Mentalis. The book lay open, its pages glowing with soft silver light. On these pages were recorded the most subtle secrets of mind magic, spells that could change the course of battle with a single word. Mens dominatus, complete control over an enemy's mind. Illugio realitas, creating illusions impossible to distinguish from reality. Memoria oblivio, erasing memories. Terror absolute, absolute horror that could drive one mad. Powerful spells, dangerous spells, those that could easily destroy enemies, but could just as easily corrupt the very witch who used them. "Child," Isla's quiet voice made her look up. The old librarian stood in the doorway, her face illuminated by the Codex's light. "I can't sleep," Rowena admitted. "I'm thinking about tomorrow, and about the spells in this book. Yes, some of them are very tempting. With their help, I could end the battle in minutes." Isla approached and sat beside her. But they would change me. Using such magic, it's like opening doors to the darkness of one's soul. I fear that if I open them, I won't be able to close them again." "Wise girl," whispered Isla. "That's exactly what distinguishes a light wizard from a dark one. Not the power you have, but how you choose to use it." "But how can I protect the village without using all available means?" "Who said you won't use them?" Rowena looked at her with surprise. "Child, the most powerful mind magic isn't control over others. It's understanding their intentions, their weaknesses, their fears. You don't need to control an enemy's mind to defeat him. It's enough to understand that mind." Isla pointed to one of the Codex's pages. "Mens comprehendo, the spell of understanding. It allows you to see a person's true motives, understand their deepest fears and desires." With such knowledge, you can predict an enemy's every move. Rowena read the spell carefully. It was complex, requiring great concentration, but carried no dark magic. An illugio naturalis, Isla continued, allows creating illusions so natural that even an experienced wizard won't immediately recognize them. Not to cause harm, but for protection. They spent the rest of the night studying these spells. When the first rays of dawn penetrated the library windows, Rowena felt ready. Not for destruction, for protection. Not for revenge, for wise resistance. And somewhere in the forests around Glen Aithne, dark figures moved through the morning mist, approaching the peaceful village where a young witch was preparing to show that the greatest power comes not from anger or greed, but from understanding and love for what is worth protecting. The battle was approaching, and it would be unlike anything the dark wizards expected to encounter in a remote Scottish glen. The mist of the third morning was thicker than usual, unnaturally thick, with a hint of greenish luminescence that made the air seem heavy and ominous. Rowena awoke to a chill running down her spine, though the room was quite warm. Her magical instincts screamed of danger. She dressed quickly and rushed from the library. The village still slept, but even in the morning quiet there was something wrong. Birds did not sing. Wind did not rustle the leaves. Even the stream seemed to flow more quietly than usual. "Isla," she called, returning to the library. The old witch was already waiting for her, standing by the window overlooking the northern slope. "They are here," Isla said quietly. "Do you feel it?" Rowena nodded, focusing on men's observance. Immediately her mind filled with sensations of alien presences. Not one, not too many. Too many. "How many?" she whispered. "More than 20. And their leader." Isla trembled. "His magic is like a black hole. It absorbs light around itself." "Malachar the Ravenbane." "Wake the village," Rowena ordered. "Quietly. Have everyone take their positions as we planned yesterday." Isla nodded and hurried away. Rowena remained another moment, using all the power of her mental abilities to read the situation. The dark wizards were approaching in 3 groups, exactly as she had predicted. The main force came along the northern path, a smaller group by the eastern route through the forest, and another, the smallest, by the southwestern way among the rocks. But something was wrong. Too simple. Too predictable. Suddenly she understood. This was a trap for her. Malachar knew she would try to protect the village, and he was counting on it. The real goal was different, to make her exhaust her strength fighting his minions while he himself penetrated to the library. "Clever," she whispered, "but not clever enough." The next half hour saw Glen Aithne transformed into a theater of war. Villagers silently took their positions. Duncan with his 2 brothers hid in the cave behind the waterfall, Mora and her father among the rocks in the southwest, Hamish and his group in the thicket by the eastern path. The old and children took shelter in the church cellar, the safest place in the village. Rowena stood on the church bell tower, from where the entire valley was visible. Her plan was more complex than it seemed. She intended to give the dark wizards what they wanted, a battle. But it would be a battle on her terms. The first enemies appeared on the northern path at 8 in the morning. 5 men in black cloaks, armed with wands and amulets. They moved confidently, clearly expecting an easy victory over simple villagers. Rowena waited until they entered the valley, then activated the first of her spells. Illugio naturalis, an illusion so natural it was impossible to distinguish from reality. Suddenly the forest around the dark wizards came alive. From behind trees began peering figures, dozens of armed villagers ready for battle. Of course, most of them were illusions, but real defenders hid among them. "Ambush!" screamed one of the dark wizards, raising his wand. But when they began casting spells, half their targets proved to be mirages. Spells flew through the illusory figures while real defenders attacked from unexpected directions. Duncan, watching from the cave, used Timor Linus, directing a wave of mild panic at one of the wizards. The man suddenly looked around, waved his wand about himself as if warding off invisible enemies. Simultaneously, Rowena activated Susuri Sylvae. The forest filled with whispers. "Surrounded them. How many are there? Strike from behind. Ready the arrows." Voices sounded from everywhere, creating the impression of a vast army. Within minutes, the disciplined group of dark wizards had become a panicked mob. They shot spells in all directions, shouted at each other, trying to understand where the attack was coming from. Hamish, hiding behind a large stone, threw ordinary rocks, but combined with illusions this looked like powerful magical projectiles. One of the dark wizards, seeing a fireball flying toward him, actually a stone wrapped in flame illusion, fell backwards in terror and rolled off the path into the bushes. "Retreat!" shouted the group's leader. "There are too many of them here." Within 15 minutes, the first group of dark wizards was fleeing back along the northern path, leaving behind 2 wounded comrades. But Rowena knew this was only the beginning. The real test lay ahead. The second group attacked half an hour later from the eastern side. This time there were 7 of them, and they were more cautious. Their leader, a thin man with a scar across his entire face, stopped the group at the forest edge. "Something's not right here," he said. "Too quiet. Prepare for traps." Rowena smiled. This was exactly what she had counted on. Cautious enemies were more predictable. This time she used different tactics. Instead of mass illusions, she created one very convincing one. The village appeared completely abandoned. No signs of life, no movement, even no smoke rising from chimneys. "Strange," muttered the scarred leader. "Perhaps they all fled?" The group cautiously entered the village. Rowena waited until they reached the center, then activated the most complex of her spells, Memoria Tempus. Not complete memory erasure like the dark version, but temporary confusion with recollections. Suddenly each of the dark wizards began seeing the village as it was at different times. Someone saw it in morning, someone in evening, someone in winter under snow. Their memories of how they had arrived became unclear and contradictory. "Wait," said one of them, stopping. "Did we come from the north or east?" "From the east, of course," replied another. "No, we went around from the south." "You've lost your minds. We came straight through the forest." While they argued, Mora and her father rolled huge boulders down the hill behind the village. The sound was terrible, like a giant avalanche. Combined with the confusion in their heads, this completely demoralized the group. "Avalanche!" someone screamed. "Earthquake! Run!" The second group also fled, even more panicked than the first. But Rowena felt no victory. She knew these were only reconnaissance groups. The real threat had not yet shown itself. And she was not mistaken. At noon, the air above the village darkened. Not from clouds, from magic. Malachar the Ravenbane had come personally. He appeared on the northern hill, tall and menacing, in a long black cloak that billowed in a wind that did not exist. His face was covered by a mask shaped like a raven's beak, and his eyes glowed with red fire. Around him walked 10 of his finest warriors, dark wizards, each capable of destroying an ordinary village with a single wand. "Little Witch of Glen Aithne," his voice echoed across the valley, magically amplified. "You have amused yourself well with my servants. But now the game is over." Rowena left the church and stood in the village center. Even at this distance, she could feel the power of his dark magic. This was a force capable of leveling entire cities. Malachar, her voice was also magically amplified, but sounded calm and confident. "You have come for the Codex, and I have come to defend my home. Foolish girl, you cannot even imagine what you are dealing with. I have destroyed entire armies. I have turned castles to ash. And you think to stop me with illusions and tricks?" "I don't think so," Rowena replied with a smile. "I know so." Malachar laughed. The sound was like the wheeze of a dying raven. "Then show me what you are capable of." He raised his hands, and darkness gathered around him. Then he cast a spell of such power that the earth trembled. A massive wave of dark energy rolled toward the village. But Rowena was ready. She activated Speculum Mentis, the Mirror of Mind, a spell that returned a magical attack back to the attacker, not as force, but as understanding. When the dark wave reached the village, it suddenly vanished, and Malachar staggered back, clutching his head. "What did you do?" he snarled. "I showed you your own magic," Rowena replied calmly. "You felt it as your victims feel it. Fear, pain, despair. You just experienced all of this yourself." Malachar quickly recovered, but in his eyes appeared a new expression, respect mixed with anger. "Clever little serpent. But this is not enough." This time he attacked not with force, but with cunning. His wizards spread across the valley, each casting Dispersio Illugio, the spell of illusion dispersal. Suddenly all the deceptions Rowena had created around the village began disappearing. "Now I see the true picture," Malachar said with satisfaction. A handful of villagers hiding behind trees. One girl against an army of dark wizards. "This will be quick." But here Rowena smiled even wider. "Are you certain you see the true picture?" Malachar hesitated. At that moment Rowena activated her most complex spell, Riolita's Multiplicata. She was not creating illusions. She was creating alternative versions of reality. Suddenly the valley filled with Rowenas. Dozens, hundreds of identical girls in blue gowns stood everywhere, on rooftops, among trees, on paths, in fields. All of them were real. All of them were genuine. All of them looked at Malachar with the same smile. "What is this?" he whispered. "This is a spell from the Codex," all the Rowenas said simultaneously. "The one you so wanted to possess. It allows creating true copies of oneself in different possible realities." The dark wizards began to panic. Which Rowena should they attack? All looked equally real, and when they began casting spells, it turned out that each Rowena could resist them. But Malachar was not a simple opponent. He quickly understood the essence of the spell. "Clever," he said, "but in all alternative realities there is one constant, the real you. Destroy you, and all copies will vanish." He closed his eyes and concentrated, using Anima Detector, the soul-seeking spell. Among all the copies, he sought the one with a true, living soul. But here Rowena used the subtlest of her tricks. A moment before he closed his eyes, she activated Anima Transfer, not the dark spell of soul transference, but the light spell of consciousness distribution. Each of her copies received a part of her true soul. "Impossible," whispered Malachar, opening his eyes. "Each of them is alive. Each has a soul." "Exactly so," replied all the Rowenas. "And now allow me to show you one more thing." All copies simultaneously extended their hands toward Malachar. But instead of attack spells, they used mens comprehendo, the spell of understanding. Suddenly Malachar saw himself as others saw him. Cruel, greedy, power-obsessed man who brought suffering wherever he went. He saw the faces of all those he had hurt. Heard children's screams, mothers weeping, desperate pleas for mercy. "Stop," he whispered, swaying. "This is your true power," said the Rowenas. "Not magic. Not knowledge. The suffering you bring to the world. Is this really how you want to be remembered?" Malachar fought against the spell, trying to block the flow of visions. But mens comprehendo, activated by hundreds of copies simultaneously, was too strong. I could have been different," he whispered. "Long ago. I too wanted to protect people." "It's not too late to change," said the real Rowena, stepping forward among her copies. But then something went wrong. One of Malachar's dark wizards, the one standing behind, suddenly raised his wand and cast Mors Instantaneous at the real Rowena. The instant death spell flew straight at her heart. Time seemed to stop, but in that moment a miracle occurred. All of Rowena's copies simultaneously rushed to protect the real one. 100 hands stretched out to meet the deadly spell. 100 voices cried out a protective word. Mors Instantaneous collided with Vita Infinita, the spell of infinite life, created by the combined power of all copies. Light and darkness mixed in the air, creating an explosion of pure energy. When the light faded, all of Rowena's copies had vanished. Only she remained, exhausted but alive. Around her lay the dark wizards, unconscious from the collision of magical forces. Malachar stood leaning on his wand, his mask cracked, revealing part of a face, young, but aged by pain and anger. "You won," he said quietly. "No," Rowena replied, approaching him. "We both lost. You, because you didn't get what you came for. I, because I was forced to fight instead of teaching." She looked into his eyes. "But we can both win if you make the right choice." "What choice?" "Leave. Take your people and go. Find another way to use your power. The world needs protectors, not destroyers." Malachar looked at her for a long time, then slowly nodded. Perhaps you are right." He waved his hand, and his unconscious wizards began awakening. One by one they rose and looked around in amazement. "Come," said Malachar. "We are finished here." "What about the Codex?" asked one of the wizards. Malachar looked at Rowena one last time. "The Codex remains where it belongs, in the hands of those who understand the true price of knowledge." When the dark wizards disappeared into the forest, Glen Athne came alive. People emerged from hiding places, children ran to their parents, and joyful cries sounded everywhere. But Rowena stood in the village center, feeling emptiness. Using such powerful magic had drained nearly all her strength. Moreover, she understood that today something had changed forever. She was no longer a simple girl with books. She had become what she was meant to be, a protector, teacher, leader. Duncan ran up to her with shining eyes. "Rowena, you were incredible. Those copies, those spells." "It was teamwork," she interrupted him. "Without all of you, I could not have succeeded. But you made them leave without fighting. Sometimes the best battle is the one that can be avoided." That evening, when the village celebrated victory, Rowena sat in the library before the Codex Mentalis. The book was open to a page with Sapientia Bellator, the spell of the wise warrior. "Did you learn something new?" asked Isla, approaching her. "Yes," Rowena replied thoughtfully. "I learned that the strongest spells are not those in books. The strongest spell is understanding when to fight and when to show mercy." She closed the codex and looked at Isla. "And I learned that wisdom comes not only from study. It comes from the experience of protecting what is dear to you." Outside the windows, Glen Aithne slept peacefully under the starlit sky, protected not only by magic, but by something far more powerful, the love and wisdom of those who called this place home. And somewhere in the forests, Malachar stopped at the wood's edge and looked back once more at the village where a young witch had shown him that true power lies not in the ability to destroy, but in the ability to protect and teach. Perhaps, he thought, it was not too late to begin again. The week following the great battle, Glen Aithne lived in a strange atmosphere, festive joy mingled with quiet expectation. People had not yet fully grasped what had occurred. They had witnessed marvels of magic, felt the power of unity, but most importantly, they had understood that their quiet girl with books had truly been a warrior of wisdom. Rowena spent her days wandering through the village and observing the changes. Children played at dark wizards and defenders. Mora had learned to create small illusions of fireflies, and Duncan was seriously inquiring about the possibility of studying magic professionally. Old Fergus told stories of the battle to anyone who would listen, adding new details each time. But the greatest changes had occurred within Rowena herself. Each morning she awoke with the feeling that the world around her had become wider, deeper, fuller of possibilities. The magic she had used during the battle had not merely exhausted her strength, it had opened new horizons of understanding. Now when she looked at people, she saw not only their faces but their dreams, fears, potential they themselves had not yet recognized. "You have changed," said Isla on the 5th morning, as they sat in the library over tea. "Yes," Rowena agreed, gazing through the window at the village awakening. "But I'm not certain whether it's for good or ill." "Tell me." Rowena turned her cup in her hands, gathering her thoughts. "During the battle I felt something powerful. Not just magic. Responsibility. For every person in this village, for every decision I make, for the consequences of every spell." She looked at Isla. "What if next time I make the wrong decision? What if my wisdom proves insufficient? What if it proves sufficient?" Isla asked gently. "Child, wisdom doesn't mean infallibility. Wisdom means the ability to learn from mistakes and make decisions with love, not fear. But people look at me differently now. They expect miracles, expect that I'll always know the right answer. And what do you think should be done about this?" Rowena was silent for a long time, then smiled. "Teach them to find their own answers." That very day she began what would later be called the School of Wisdom of Glen Aithne. Not an official school with buildings and rules, but something far more natural, gatherings beneath the old oak where anyone could come and learn. "Who wants to learn about the magic of plants?" she asked on the first day. Children came, adults came, even old Fergus hobbled over with curiosity. "Magic doesn't begin with wands and spells," Rowena explained, holding an ordinary sprig of heather in her hands. "It begins with understanding. This flower. What do you see?" "A pink flower," said little Eilish, Hamish's daughter. "A pretty flower," added her mother. "I see more," said Rowena softly. "I see roots reaching deep into the earth, seeking water. Leaves turning toward the sun. Petals that smell so as to attract bees. This isn't just a flower. It's a complex system of life interacting with everything around it." She held out the flower to Eilish. "Now you look again." The little girl took the flower and closed her eyes as Rowena did. When she opened them, her face shone with wonder. I can feel it. It's alive." "Exactly so. And when you truly understand something living, you can communicate with it." Over the following days, Rowena taught all who wished the fundamentals of what she called wise magic. Not powerful spells of destruction, but the subtle arts of understanding and harmony. Duncan learned to speak with birds, not to magically control them, but to truly communicate, understanding their needs and fears. Mora discovered a talent for illusions of beauty. She could make withered flowers appear fresh, faded colors bright, wrinkled faces young. Not deception, but revelation of hidden beauty. Hamish, to everyone's amazement, revealed abilities with the magic of mechanisms. He could sense his mill's mood, understand when the wheel needed repair or the channel clearing. Even old Fergus found his gift, memory. He could not only recall events from years past in the smallest detail, but help others recover forgotten recollections. Do you see? Said Isla, watching the lessons from the library window. You're not simply teaching them magic. You're helping them discover who they truly are. That's the best magic of all, Rowena replied. But the true test of her new wisdom came 2 weeks after the battle. That morning a small group appeared at the village outskirts, 3 adults and 4 children, dirty, hungry, frightened. Refugees from another village that had suffered an attack by dark wizards. Please, pleaded the woman who seemed to be their leader. Our home is destroyed. Our fields burned. We've walked for 3 days, eaten nothing. Would you give us just some food and shelter for one night? The villagers of Glen Aithne gathered around, their faces expressing sympathy, but also concern. Food was sufficient, but not abundant. Winter was approaching, and every family worried about their own survival. Of course we'll help, said Hamish, though doubt was in his voice. For one night, added Duncan quietly. And then, Rowena stood apart, observing the scene. She felt each person's internal conflict in the village, the desire to help mixed with fear for their own safety. This was a moment when she would have to make a decision not only for herself, but for the entire community. Isla, she said quietly, use Veritas Cordis. I want to know the truth about these people. Isla nodded and discreetly cast the truth-revealing spell. After a moment she approached Rowena. They speak the truth, she whispered. Their village was indeed destroyed. But there's something else. The woman is hiding something important. Rowena approached the refugees. The woman, middle-aged, with gray hair and intelligent eyes, looked at her with a mixture of hope and despair. What is your name? Rowena asked gently. Bridget McAllister. These are my children, Tam and Jean. And this is the Campbell family, Murdoch, his wife Anne, and their children Kirsty and little Jamie. Rowena nodded, then focused on men's observance. The woman was indeed experiencing pain from losing her home, truly worried about the children. But there was another layer of thought hidden deeper. Bridget, said Rowena calmly, you didn't flee only from dark wizards, did you? The woman's face grew tense. I don't understand what you fled from someone else, from someone who might come here seeking you. A long pause. The children looked at the adults with confusion, sensing tension in the air. Finally Bridget lowered her head. My son, she whispered. My eldest son Callum. He joined the dark wizards. Not those who attacked your village, another group. When they destroyed our village, I took the children and fled. But he knows where I might be. And he might come for us. A murmur ran through the crowd. Several people stepped back from the refugees. You've brought danger to our home, someone cried. We've just fought off dark wizards. They must go. But Rowena raised her hand, and all fell silent. Bridget, she said, how old is your son? 18. He was a good lad. But when his father died last year, something in him broke. He became angry, bitter at the whole world. And then these wizards came and promised him power, the chance to avenge all wrongs. Tears flowed down her cheeks. I couldn't stop him. And when he helped them destroy our village, I realized I had lost my son forever. Rowena looked long at the woman, then at the frightened children, then at her fellow villagers. This was a difficult decision, perhaps the hardest of her life. You will stay, she said finally. Rowena, protested Duncan. What if her son really comes? Then we shall speak with him. Speak? Duncan was amazed. With a dark wizard? Yes, Rowena replied firmly. If my recent experiences have taught me anything, it's that beneath every dark wizard hides a person who made wrong choices, but who can still be saved. She turned to Bridget. But I have one condition. If your son comes, you will help me speak with him. Not as a mother making excuses, but as a mother who loves enough to speak the truth. Bridget nodded through her tears. The next 3 days saw Glen Aithne prepare for the possible arrival of Callum McAllister. But this time preparation was different. Instead of traps and ambushes, Rowena organized what she called a circle of understanding. If he comes with anger, she explained, we shall meet him with calm. If he comes with hatred, we shall show him love. Not naive, blind love, but wise love that sees pain beneath anger. Duncan shook his head skeptically. What if he simply attacks us? Then we shall defend ourselves. But first we shall try to understand. Callum appeared on the 4th evening as the village prepared for sleep. He came alone, a tall, thin young man with burning eyes and a wand in his hand. His dark magic was powerful but chaotic, like that of someone who did not yet fully control their abilities. Mother, he shouted, standing at the village edge. I know you're here. Come out. Rowena stepped out to meet him, holding not a wand but a lit candle. "Callum McAllister," she said calmly. "I am Rowena Ravenclaw. Your mother and the children are under my protection." He laughed bitterly. "Under the protection of some girl? Has my mother become so weak? Your mother has become wise. She understood that sometimes the bravest act is to ask for help. Help!" He stepped forward, magical energy crackling around him. "Where was help when my father died? Where was help when our house burned to the ground? Where was your wisdom then?" Rowena felt the pain in his words, real pain of loss that had transformed into anger. "You are right," she said, surprising him. "The world is unjust. Good people suffer. Evil sometimes triumphs. And your pain is real and understandable." Callum hesitated, expecting denial, not understanding. "But," Rowena continued, "pain doesn't justify causing pain to others. Your suffering doesn't become less if you make innocents suffer." "Innocents?" He laughed again, but now with less certainty in his laughter. "No one is innocent in this world. They all watched as we suffered and did nothing. And what are you doing now? Helping the suffering or creating new suffering?" Instead of answering, Callum raised his wand. "Enough talk. Give me my mother and the children. They are mine." "No," said Rowena quietly. "They are not possessions to be owned. They are people with the right to choose." At that moment, Bridget McAllister stepped from behind her. "Callum," she said, and in her voice was such pain and love that even the ominous aura around the young man wavered. "My son. Mother." His voice became less certain. "Come. We're leaving this place." "Where, Callum? To what life? To power? To strength? To the ability to—" He stopped. "To what, son?" "To the ability to do to others what was done to us." A long pause. Tears flowed down Callum's face, though he tried to hide them. "They deserve it," he whispered. "And do the children deserve it? Little Jamie, who's only 5 years old. Your sister, Jean? Do they deserve to live in fear?" Rowena stepped forward. "Callum, I won't tell you your pain doesn't matter. It matters. But there are 2 ways to live with pain. You can let it turn you into a monster, or you can use it to understand others' suffering and help them." "Easy to say," he snapped. "What do you know about loss?" "I know about responsibility," Rowena replied. "Every day I make decisions that affect the lives of people I love. Every day I fear making a mistake that will harm them. And do you know what frightens me most?" Callum waited silently. "That my fear or pain might make me make decisions from selfishness rather than love. That I might become someone who causes suffering instead of healing it." She extended her hand to him. "You can choose a different life, Callum. You can use your power to protect rather than destroy. Your mother needs a son, not a master. Your brother and sister need a protector, not a source of fear." Callum looked long at the outstretched hand, at her face, at his mother standing beside her with hope and anxiety in her eyes. What if I don't know how to be different?" "Then we shall teach you," said Rowena simply. Slowly, very slowly, Callum lowered his wand. The magical aura around him began to fade. I've done terrible things," he whispered. "I know, and you cannot undo them. But you can begin doing good things. You can begin to atone." Bridget stepped toward her son. "Callum?" He looked at her, and for the first time in many months his eyes held not rage, but simply pain, pure human pain. "Mother, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for everything." She embraced him, and he wept, not with angry, furious tears, but with tears of repentance and release. Rowena quietly stepped aside, allowing the family to reunite. But even standing apart, she knew this was only the beginning of a long journey. Callum had much to atone for, much to learn. And the village had to learn to trust him. But the most important step had been taken. The following months were difficult but rewarding. Callum truly began a new life. He used his magical power to help rebuild damaged houses, heal sick animals, protect the village from wild beasts. At first people feared him, but gradually they began to accept him. Duncan became his friend and mentor in light magic. Mora taught him to create beautiful illusions instead of terrifying ones. Even old Fergus told him stories of second chances and forgiveness. But most of all, Callum learned from Rowena. "Why did you trust me?" he asked one winter evening as they sat in the library studying ancient texts on healing magic. "Because I saw in you what you didn't see in yourself," she replied. "The capacity for love. Even beneath all that anger and pain, it was there. What if you had been wrong? What if I truly was a monster? Then I would have stopped you. But first I would have tried to understand." Callum nodded, turning the pages of an ancient book. Rowena, have you never thought of leaving this village? With your abilities, you could become a great witch, found a school of magic, change the world. Rowena smiled. Who says I'm not doing that? She pointed to the window, beyond which people from all over the region gathered in the firelight, not only from Glen Aithne but from other villages. They came to learn, share knowledge, find support. You see, Callum, one needn't build great castles to change the world. Sometimes it's enough to show a few people that they can be better than they think. And they will show it to others, and those to the next, like a stone thrown into water. Exactly so. The circles spread until they reached the very shores. Spring brought new challenges and new opportunities. People began coming to Glen Aithne not only as students, but as other teachers, wise women and men from different corners of Scotland, and even from abroad. Each brought their own knowledge, their own wisdom. Isla introduced Rowena to Helga from the Welsh valleys, a kind which specializing in healing magic and plants. There also came Godric from the English moors, a brave young wizard who had devoted his life to protecting the weak from dark forces. "Where is Salazar?" asked Rowena when the three friends sat by the fire discussing future plans for teaching young wizards. "Salazar is complicated," replied Godric thoughtfully. "He's brilliant, powerful, but has very firm views on who is worthy of learning magic and who is not." "Perhaps he simply hasn't met the right people yet," said Rowena. "Perhaps he needs to see that magic doesn't depend on birth, but on character." Helga nodded. "You're right. And you know what? I think our little schools in different villages are wonderful, but what if we created something greater? A place where children from all corners could come to learn." "A great school," said Godric dreamily, "with high towers and great halls. With libraries full of wisdom," added Rowena. "And with gardens for studying plant magic," laughed Helga. "Where would we build it?" asked Godric. Rowena looked at the hills around Glen Aithne, at the lake gleaming in moonlight, at the ancient forest keeping its secrets. "Somewhere near water," she said thoughtfully. "Water symbolizes wisdom, depth, reflection of truth. And near forest. Forest provides protection, mysteries, opportunities for research." "What would we call it?" asked Helga. The three friends were silent for a long time, gazing into the fire, each thinking of their dreams and hopes. "Hogwarts," said Rowena suddenly. "Like the hogwort, a healing plant. A place where souls are healed, where people become better than themselves." "Hogwarts," repeated Godric, and approval was in his voice. "School of witchcraft and wizardry." But that was in the future. Now, on this spring night, Rowena sat in the library of Glen Aithne, recording her thoughts about what she had learned this year. True wisdom comes not from books, though books are important. It comes from understanding that every person has potential for good and evil, and our choice determines which potential we use. True power is not in the ability to control others, but in the ability to inspire them to be better. True leadership is not in having all the answers, but in teaching others to find their own answers. And most importantly, true love is manifested not in permissiveness, but in readiness to speak difficult truth to help another grow. She set down her quill and looked at the Codex Mentalis lying open on the table, the book for which so many people had fought, which could give power over others' minds. Now it seemed simply one of many tools of learning, important, but not an end in itself. The real power was not in the book. It was in people, in Duncan, who had learned to trust himself, in Moira, who had discovered beauty in ordinary things, in Callum, who had found a path from darkness to light, in all those who had come to Glen Aithne seeking wisdom and found much more, community, understanding, hope. Outside the window dawn was breaking. Rowena rose and went to the window, watching the village awaken. Smoke rose from chimneys, children ran into the streets, adults began their daily work. But now this was not simply work, it was service to the common good, each using their unique talents for the benefit of all. "You didn't sleep all night?" asked Isla, entering with a cup of hot tea. "I was thinking," Rowena replied, accepting the tea, "about everything that happened, about what comes next. And what conclusions did you reach?" Rowena smiled, and in her smile was new maturity, wisdom gained through trials. That the best magic is that which makes people better. Not stronger, not more powerful, but better. Kinder, wiser, capable of love and forgiveness. She stepped away from the window and sat at the table where her notes lay. "And that my mission is only beginning. Glen Aithne is only the first drop in the ocean. But from it will begin the circles." Suddenly the library doors opened, and a young man she had never seen before entered. Tall, elegant, with sharp features and cold green eyes. He wore an expensive cloak, and in his hand was a wand of rare wood. Salazar Slytherin. He introduced himself with a bow. I have come to see the witch who, by rumor, can teach magic even to Muggle-born. Rowena looked at him carefully, using men's observance. His mind was like a rocky labyrinth, complex, sharp, full of prejudices, but also brilliant in its organization. And what do you think of such rumors? She asked calmly. I think it's a waste of time and resources, he replied bluntly. Magic is a gift of blood, heritage of generations. To teach it to those who lack proper lineage. Callum, Rowena called. After a moment young McAllister entered the library. Over recent months he had changed greatly. His shoulders had straightened, his eyes had become clear, and around him was felt an aura of calm confidence. Yes, Rowena? Show Master Slytherin the Lux Curativa spell you learned last week. Callum nodded and extended his hands toward a pot with a wilting flower on the windowsill. Soft golden radiance enveloped the plant, and it immediately straightened, its petals becoming bright and fresh. Beautiful, Salazar admitted, but disdain was in his voice. Though elementary, I could teach any pureblood that spell in half an hour. Perhaps, Rowena agreed, but it's not about how quickly someone learns a spell. It's about why they use it. She nodded to Callum, and he left. A year ago this young man was a dark wizard. He used magic to destroy, 'cause pain, take revenge. Now he uses it to heal and protect. What changed? Not his blood, not his natural abilities. His heart changed. Salazar frowned. A dark wizard? And you trusted him? I helped him become different. Just as magic can be light or dark depending on the wizard's intentions, people can change depending on what values are instilled in them. Interesting theory, said Salazar coldly. But I believe some traits are inborn. Nobility, honor, purity of intentions, these are heritage of blood. Rowena stood and approached him. What would you say about me, Master Slytherin? About my blood? He looked at her carefully, obviously using some spell of lineage determination. Pure blood, he said after a pause. Ancient line, worthy of respect. And if I were Muggle-born, would my achievements, my wisdom, my ability to teach others become less valuable? Naturally, magic without proper roots is what exactly, Master Slytherin? Less powerful? Less pure? Or simply less convenient for those who want to preserve their own advantage? Salazar's eyes flashed with anger. You don't understand. Blood purity isn't superstition. It's reality. Muggle-born cannot understand our traditions, our culture. They will bring chaos to our world. Like Duncan and Mora, whose parents were ordinary villagers, brought chaos to Glen Aithne? Rowena pointed out the window where Duncan was teaching a group of children to create light figures, and Mora was helping an elderly woman carry heavy baskets. Or like Callum, a pure-blood wizard who used his magic for destruction brought chaos? Salazar was silent, but conflicting emotions struggled in his eyes. Master Slytherin, Rowena continued more softly, I'm not saying traditions aren't important. They are important. But when traditions become chains preventing us from seeing good in other people, then they lose their value. She approached the shelf and took an ancient book. Here is a chronicle of our ancestors. Do you know what I found in it? Stories of pure-blood wizards who became dark lords, and stories of Muggle-born who sacrificed their lives to protect the wizarding world. But what? Blood doesn't determine character, Master Slytherin. Choice determines character. A long pause. Salazar looked at the book, then at Rowena, then again out the window. Suppose, he said finally, suppose you are right about individual people. But how can you guarantee that teaching everyone indiscriminately won't lead to degradation of the magical world? I can't, Rowena replied honestly. Just as you can't guarantee that teaching only purebloods won't lead to stagnation and decline. She sat opposite him. But do you know what I can guarantee? That if we teach all children, regardless of origin, to be better people, then the magical world will become better. And if we teach them prejudice and hatred, then the world will become worse. Salazar was silent for a long time, turning his wand in his hands. What would you say about those who simply cannot be good? You saw how easily your Callum turned to the dark side. What to do with such people? Teach them anyway, Rowena replied without hesitation. But teach them not only magic. Teach them to understand the consequences of their actions, feel responsibility for others, find strength in protecting the weak rather than oppressing them. And if that doesn't work, Rowena thought of Malachar, of the dark wizards she had had to stop. Then we shall stop them, but first we shall try to save them. Salazar stood and began pacing the room. Your ideals are noble, he said finally, but naive. The world is crueler than you think. Perhaps. But it won't become kinder if we stop trying. Suddenly Salazar stopped and looked at her with a penetrating gaze. What would you say about those who believe some knowledge is too dangerous to share with everyone? Rowena understood this was the key question. She looked at the Codex Mentalis. Knowledge itself is neither good nor evil. It becomes so depending on how it's used. Yes, some knowledge is dangerous. But hiding it doesn't make the world safer. It simply gives advantage to those who already possess it. What if this knowledge falls into wrong hands? Then our duty as teachers is to ensure we've taught our students enough wisdom to use knowledge correctly. Salazar sat again. You propose creating a school where everyone will learn, regardless of origin. Where everyone gets the same knowledge. Where everyone is taught the same way. No, Rowena objected. I propose creating a school where every child has a chance to learn. But not everyone the same, each according to their abilities and character. She stood and approached the map on the wall. Imagine a school with 4 houses. Each would value certain qualities. Each would have its traditions. You could lead a house for those who value ambition and determination. Godric for the brave and noble. Helga for the hard-working and loyal. And you for the clever, finished Salazar. Exactly. Each child would find their place where their strengths would be valued and developed. But what if the houses become enemies? That's why we need to teach them that diversity is strength, not weakness. That each house makes the school better. Salazar thought for a long time. And you truly believe this will work? That purebloods and Muggle-born, Gryffindor and Slytherin can coexist peacefully? I don't know, Rowena admitted honestly. But I know that if we don't try, we'll never find out. She approached him. Master Slytherin, you can leave here and continue teaching only those you consider worthy. Or you can stay and help create something new. A school where every child has a chance to become better than themselves. Salazar stood and went to the window. He looked long at the village where people of different origins worked together, learned from each other, supported each other. What if I stay and still mainly teach purebloods? Then at least you'll teach them alongside others. And perhaps in time you'll see that blood isn't the only thing that matters. A long pause. Then Salazar turned. Very well. I'll stay. But with a condition. What condition? If I see that Muggle-born truly threaten our culture, our traditions, I shall have the right to leave and take with me those who agree with me. Rowena felt sadness at these words but nodded. Agreed. But I hope such a day will never come. And I hope for that too, Salazar said unexpectedly softly. They shook hands, the beginning of an alliance that would be both blessing and curse for the future school. When Salazar left, Isla approached Rowena. Do you think you did right? I don't know, Rowena admitted. But I know that if I had pushed him away, he would forever remain an enemy of everything we fight for. This way, perhaps there's a chance. And if not, then we'll deal with the consequences. Together. A month after Salazar's visit to Glen Aithne, a letter came from Godric. He wrote about a beautiful place by a lake in Scotland where a school could be built. A place surrounded by forests and mountains, hidden from prying eyes, but accessible to those who truly sought knowledge. Rowena read the letter standing on the same hill where a year ago she had first seen Grimwald. How much had changed since then? Then she had been simply a girl with books who wanted to protect her home. Now she was founder of a future school of magic, teacher of teachers, one who had shown that true wisdom comes not from accumulating knowledge, but from understanding how to use that knowledge for others' benefit. Ready for a new challenge? Asked Isla, approaching her. Ready, Rowena replied, folding the letter. Glen Aithne has taught me everything necessary. Now it's time to carry these lessons further. She looked once more at the village where it all began. At children playing by the stream. At adults working in the fields. At Callum helping an elderly woman carry firewood. At all this peaceful, beautiful life made possible because people had learned to see in each other not enemies but friends. Wit beyond measure is man's greatest treasure. She whispered the words that would become her future house's motto. And indeed, she thought, walking the path to the village, true treasure is not gold, not magical artifacts, not even powerful spells. True treasure is understanding, wisdom, the ability to see potential for good in every person and help them realize that potential. And the greatest treasure of all is the knowledge that even in the darkest times there is always hope, always a chance to change everything for the better. One need only have courage to try and wisdom, not to give up when attempts don't succeed the first time. As Rowena Ravenclaw lay down to sleep that night for the last time in her room in Glen Aithne's library, She thought not of what she was leaving behind, but of what lay ahead. Of a castle by a lake where children from all over Britain would gather. Of houses that would become families for thousands of students. Of knowledge that would be passed from generation to generation. And of how the most important lesson she would give her students would be not spells or potions, but understanding that true magic is the ability to change the world for the better, one person at a time. The wind outside whispered of the future, and in its voice were echoes of future generations. Students of Hogwarts who would learn not only magic but wisdom, not only power but compassion, not only knowledge but understanding of how to use that knowledge to protect and serve others. The wise warrior of Glen Aithne fell asleep, ready for the next great adventure in her life, creating a school that would become home to magic, wisdom, and hope for centuries to come.